Hello folks, welcome to a new video on the Northern Exile channel. Today we're going to be discussing why campaign games, in my own humble opinion, are the best way to play Warhammer 40,000. Without further ado, let me just jump straight in. I spent all day writing this yesterday. Well, not all day, but throughout the day I was coming back to the script and adding to it and doing little bits of research here and there. And I actually found a really cool PDF of the 3rd edition rulebook, which we'll be looking at a little bit later on as a bit of a bonus thing. In fact, I'll be looking at it in the next few minutes, so stick around for that. So campaigns, in my opinion, are the best way to play Warhammer 40,000. Please take on board that is my opinion. That may not be the truth for you, that may not be your truth, but it is mine. So please respect it and don't jump down my throat telling me that, you know, all of my ideas and opinions are wrong, because just because they differ from yours doesn't mean that they're wrong. And just because you have a different opinion on what makes the Warhammer 40,000 hobby so amazing, you may have a different opinion on that score. That's fine. As long as you enjoy Warhammer, you're good with me, my friend, alright? Alright, let's dive in. I think you all know the saving effects on my sanity that campaigns had when running my own store. But what even is a Warhammer 40,000 campaign? To put it simply, a campaign is a series of battles with escalating stakes played between friends to decide the fate of a campaign setting. The setting can be anything from a city, which is good for a kill team campaign, to continents, worlds, and even whole sectors of space. Vast regions stretching across the stars themselves. The beautiful thing about the campaign is that it is malleable enough as a concept to cover all of these settings with relative ease. In the old Warhammer 40,000 rulebooks, campaigns were given pride of place. In fact, if you looked in the 3rd edition rulebook back in the day, you will find ideas for campaigns that are at the front and the back of the hobby portions of the book. Of course, all of your rules are at the very front and centre, your lore is front and centre, but in terms of how to do the hobby, the campaign is given pride of place. It's right there, right at the start. There are even sample campaigns that you can play through with friends, with tables and all, to show you how a campaign should look. Even the missions of this rulebook show mere ideas for missions, but they are heavily encouraged, well, they do encourage 40k gamers to think up their own missions and add them to their repertoire of games for upcoming campaigns and events that they're doing, right? My point here is, the setting and the game used to be a lot more about the gamer and having your own experience in this setting than it is right now. Let's have a little look at that, shall we? Here is the wonderful, the stalwart, the age-old 3rd edition Warhammer 40,000 rulebook. Kids, if you've not seen this or you've not read it yet, you owe it to yourself to go back and have a little look at this rulebook. But before I go any further, let's have a little trip down memory lane. Just me and the dads. Me and the other dads who are watching this video, right? I'm sure you remember this epic tome of a book. One of the last ones that Rick Priestley was involved in, the guy who made the entire, you know, Warhammer 40,000 hobby, essentially. He's got a foreword here, which is very nice. And of course, I remember this from when I was a kid, the Eternity Gate, and the actual, it really did warp my mind how it didn't start with like an introduction to the actual setting. It started with an introduction to what the Eternity Gate looks like. The gate that you go to before you go into the throne room that the Emperor is sitting in, right? How cool is that? It focuses the entire setting down to the throne room and shows you what it is. And pieces of art like this, these John Blanchian pieces of art, really, really, really do capture 40k, at least for me, you know? Anyway, I'll move on from my... Oh, look at that, look at that. Absolutely amazing. You know, many people have tried to do this again in Horus Heresy. They've tried to do this piece of artwork again, especially in the later, you know, the End and the Death novels on the front covers. They've never managed the scale, ever. This is the scale I'm thinking of when I'm thinking about the throne room, when I'm thinking about the Golden Throne, this massive piece of Dark Age technology that the Emperor sits upon, this is what I'm thinking about. Look at the size of that thing. That's it. That's beyond scope. That's 40k in its essence for me. Of course, you've got the throne room itself, with these mine sleeves and things. Emperor on the Golden Throne. And now we get into the contents. So I'm not going to go through the entire book, but what I do want to go into is look at these. How I remember having this book when I was a kid and flicking through these and just not knowing where to start, man. I didn't know where to start. I loved Eldar back in the day, we'll say that. But I didn't know. It all looked so cool to me. I didn't even know what to do or where to go. It was insane. You got your typical Space Marine army there, which is cool. Massive big Imperial Guard armies. Pictures of the lads in the studio playing actual games. Gav Thorpe's Eldar army. I mean, it's just, dude, you owe it to yourself to go back and look at some of these books. I'm gonna actually go and read this again very soon because it just brings back so many memories. Look at this. All these things you don't see in rule books these days. 40k takes itself so seriously these days. And look at this. Just how to undercoat and spray some models. Right? How to paint. Just, layering one bit of paint on top of another. The tabletop battlefield. How it can look. How you can play the game on your floor if you want to. That was all in the old school 40k rulebooks. Doing your own terrain. Do you have to buy Games Workshop terrain? No, you can make your own. Look what we made out of this styrofoam, right? Beautiful, beautiful books like this really did open your mind to the possibilities that your imagination can run away with in this setting. And I think that's my entire point of this video, to just bring it back in, is that the game itself is about imagination. And I think going on into the modern era, we've sort of lost all of this colour and panache and nuance and happiness, the sheer happiness of doing the hobby. And I'll get into that in a minute because I'm going to sound like a curmudgeonly grumpy old man. But anyway, I love this book. You owe it to yourself to get out there and give it a read, right? Okay, cool. First of all, I want to have a little look at something that I really, really, really think you might get a kick out of for this video at least. And that is on page 157. Let me just put that in there. Bang. Here we go. So, fighting a Warhammer 40,000 campaign. So instead of me explaining to you what a campaign is, why don't we hear it from the horse's mouth itself, right? Okay. Once you've become familiar with the Warhammer 40,000 rules and played a few one-off games, you might want to start linking your battles together and developing some continuity for your army. This is called a campaign. Realise what they've said there, right? They haven't said go and tell some quirky stories that are based on the campaign. Games Workshop, back in the day, they considered campaigns to be intrinsic to the art of building your army. And, to the matter of, if you're not doing this, you're not playing the game properly. Okay, you need to be expanding the narrative of 40k through your expressions of an army on the tabletop. This is called a campaign, a series of battles linked together by a story and by the forces fighting it. Wars are rarely resolved by a single battle, and even very large battles are preceded by smaller actions between scouts and lighter troops. After a battle, there are always the mopping up operations as the vanquished side attempts to escape. With a campaign, you can create this story around your own army, seeing it triumph in battle, and that is my mother, by the way, so don't worry about that. Seeing it triumph in battle, after battle, or thwarted in its every endeavour, right? Now that kind of went away after a while, okay? We didn't really do, so I just switched all my notifications off. Thank you for the person in my last video who said that. I just forgot to do it. So thank you for the person who did that, who told me how to switch off notifications. Wonderful of you. Thank you very much. Games Workshop thought this was so intrinsic to the hobby that it was front and centre. It's right here. Okay? It even gives you different kinds of campaigns. A ladder campaign, right? A map campaign, and a tree campaign. I actually have an example of a map campaign that I can show you, because it's from one of our lovely, lovely people who wrote in to Hobby Nightmares the other week, and it is a really, really good, in-depth look at what an actual campaign setting could look like if you use it properly, right? I'm sure you won't mind me sharing this, because I think it's absolutely brilliant. Absolutely. Let me just download that. I mean, when I saw these maps, I literally thought, oh my days, I need to play games with this guy. Like, I literally thought, this is the most wonderfully creative thing I've seen in the hobby for quite a while. Right, I'm going to just pop it on the screen right now. 1 second. Here we go. Let's whack it on, shall we? This is how we do videos on Northern Exile channel, by the way. We do them very raw. Arcturus, this is the setting that he was fighting in. And this is literally what they did. Look at that for a campaign map. A beautiful, beautiful campaign map showing how all the different alliances are fighting over the territory on this world. What a wonderful thing to do. You know? That's incredible. How clever. How clever a way to do it. So this would be a map campaign that 40k was talking about in the book there. You know, a map-based campaign uses a map, surprise, surprise, to control the action of each force under a player's control. There are campaign turns between battles, in which the players move their forces about on the map. Cool, huh? Absolutely brilliant. I love it. Absolutely love this kind of wanton creativity that we have in the hobby at times. There's even a whole sector map here that I thought was absolutely superb. Right? Look at that. I absolutely defy you to show me another part of the hobby that does things like this. That allows you to really, really get your teeth into a campaign setting. Look at this, dude. How amazing is this? I'm so impressed that they came up with this. Absolutely amazing. Well done to them. I'm going to leave that up for a little bit. In fact, no. I'm going to pull you back down to the Warhammer 40,000 rulebook, because I want to show you something else, and that is the tree campaign. This is the campaign that you might have heard of that is the most common form, right? It is a tree where you can see very clearly, you know, a cleanse mission. If the attacker wins, we go down this tree. If the defender wins, we go down this tree. And on and on and on we go, right? Cool. And that's what we do. That's how we play campaigns. And Games Workshop showed, here we go, their D&D/role-playing game experience by doing campaigns and experience. So they turned 40k into a role-playing game of sorts. Characters earning experience points. Right? Characters getting better as the games went on. That was all an intrinsic part of the hobby back in the day. People could even lose experience for having run away from battle. Or they can gain experience from killing something that's quite elite. And they can get more and more and more powerful. And their points cost gets more and more and more expensive as the guy levels up, as the campaign goes on. That is incredible. That is absolutely incredible. And this is the kind of hobby that I really get a kick out of. And that's why, when I see the hobby going a certain way, I kind of get a bit disheartened. Let's move into what I mean by that. Tournaments and campaigns are very, very different things, right? Now, tournament players, please don't cringe. I'm not going to go after you in too much of an in-depth thing. As I've just said, I completely understand and agree with the fact that your hobby is yours, and you play it the way you want to play it. And whatever way you get the most enjoyment out of it, that's a completely valid way to play the game. But it doesn't mean other people have to agree with you, and it doesn't mean that other people owe you a game of Warhammer 40,000. I certainly don't, right? I don't force you into my campaigns. You don't force me into your tournaments. That's how we go. Although I have been to a few this year, but we'll get into that in a minute. So tournaments and campaigns, I think this is where the first big point of this video will land. Tournaments. As they have become more professional, popular, and organised, they have eaten away at the spirit of ownership in Warhammer 40,000. Before you jump down my throat, before you go there, alright, think about it for just a second. Tournaments are anathema to campaigns because they are based in the real world and must be fair, or at least as fair as the rulebook can make them, and even then, tournament games can become extremely one-sided. They are based in the real world of playing a war game. Two players playing at a tournament are playing a war game over a table. Campaign players are playing a campaign that is going on in the Warhammer 40,000 setting. Therein lies the main difference. The problem is, the Warhammer 40,000 setting, and by a large extent the game, has gone far more into the tournament side of things than they have the campaign side of things. You will not see things, by and large, like this in your rule books from now on. Unless, well, we haven't for the past, like, 3 or 4 editions, actually. It's been siphoned away more and more and more onto the side part. You're right, campaigns aren't really a thing in the rulebook anymore. They're there, if you look for them closely, maybe on a page or two. But the main force of the Warhammer 40,000 hobby right now is keeping games competitive and gamey. You know, everything revolves around tournament experience. That's what it revolves around now. We have narrative games, sure we have narrative games, but even the narrative games are framed in a very tournament-friendly way. Right? That's what I mean. So, if one's based in the real world and one is based in the Warhammer 40,000 setting, why is it so difficult for them to coexist in the same space? They're in the same hobby, right? We're all in the same hobby. Well, I think that is the soul of Warhammer 40,000, right? They are based, tournaments at least, are based in the real world of playing a war game, and campaigns are based in the fictional setting of telling a story in the 41st millennium. I think that is the soul of Warhammer 40,000, and since older editions of the game, we have lost a lot of this magic and creative spark out of our hobby. Why? Because Games Workshop want to pander to the tournament market. The gaming side of the market. It's very ironic that Games Workshop stores hate gamers, hate people playing the game, but their entire game system has moved away from the narrative side and onto the more competitive side. It's very strange that their attitude is that. I am not blaming tournaments as the bane of all evils and the cause of this gradual shift, but they are definitely a culprit, and I do not think modern tournaments and campaigns in their current guise can coexist at all. Tournaments are designed around game meta, around standing outside of the hobby, and examining its moving parts under the hood. Campaigns are about embracing the setting of the game itself and the stories that can be told within. In the past, model sets from Games Workshop were becoming more customizable, more prone to conversions and imaginations going wild. We can see that in our rulebook here, right? In our rulebook here, nearly at the start of this rulebook, we will have, again, if I can just pull you all the way back here, a lot of the starting parts of this rulebook are built around converting your models. Taking your models and messing around with them and creating something that is, by and large, your own. Even the battlefield terrain that you saw before, that's all conversion work. Games Workshop sold certain parts of scenery, but they wanted you to build up your skill set, and go and make them yourself. That's what they wanted. You know? Conversions were a huge part of the hobby back then. That's just where we were. That's just where we were. If you can see it here, we can see here, look. Battlefield terrain, you know, we've got all these different things that have been converted over the years. We've got all models that have been converted into things that look completely new. We've had all different kinds of colour schemes on here. Not one Ultramarine is on here. We have a Black Templar instead. And we have some Dark Eldar instead, because they came with the box set, right? Not everything is uniform, not everything is exactly the same. And when they show you tabletop wargame battles, there's not a Space Marine on here, right? There's Eldar and Imperial Guard, there's Chaos and Eldar, and there's Tyranids and Imperial Guard. The Space Marines right at the bottom down here. This was a golden age of the hobby and for creativity, because that's what they wanted from you. They wanted you to make it your own. They didn't tell you how to enjoy it. Today, we have more monopose models than ever before. A dialing back on converting even being touted by Games Workshop as a thing you could do. You look at the modern rulebook, how much of that rulebook is given over to creating your own scenery, creating your own troops, and all that kind of a thing. Very little compared to the old rulebooks. Everything these days is homogenized, the same, conveyor belt, and what does that help? Tournaments, not campaigns. Tournaments and competitive play thrives on this kind of the same tools for everybody approach, as then the game comes down purely to skill. I think what a lot of people are afraid to admit, though, is that Warhammer 40,000 has never really been about player skill. Hear me out. This is a dice game based on luck, mostly. You could bring the most overpowered list with the best general who knows the game inside and out, but if the dice say that he's losing, he's losing. Even against a player with a fluffy army and hardly any codex experience. The most experienced player is going to lose if the dice say so. People put, in my opinion, far too much weight behind their skills at a game that is, for the most part, completely chance-based. You can fudge the numbers, sure, push the odds slightly more in your favour by list building and player skill, but that's all you're doing. You're fudging the numbers and slightly pushing them in your favour. You will be lucky in games of Warhammer 40,000 to see an amazing skill move in every few games. Most games you play tend to be decided by turn 3 through either luck, because the dice have either decreed it so, or a list has simply and dryly beaten another list because the numbers were fudged in the favour of that list by its building, by its general building it in the first place. To me, there is no skill, again this is just my opinion, there is no skill or very little skill in building an overpowered list in Warhammer 40,000 because it's bloody easy to do so. It's so easy to examine the meta for half an hour and build something amazing. There's very little skill in that. The skill is in using the army. Alright? The flow of battle is where skill lies. And I want to give you an example from my past. I used to go to Games Workshop here in Liverpool, and I used to go with a friend called Andy and another friend called Danny, right? We used to go to Games Workshop, and we'd have wonderful Saturday afternoons of playing narrative campaign games in the store campaign setting, where we would try and conquer the world of Attila, which is actually a world in 40k. It's a feudal world, go and look it up, and we would try and conquer different parts of that for our Imperium team. It was awesome, and one day, my friend Andy was playing a game with his Space Wolves against a very shooty-heavy Imperial Guard list. And I mean shooty. This was a massive, massive list. And towards the end of the game, Andy's Wolf Guard are holding the centre objective. So they're going to win the game. If they can just hold it. The Imperial Guard will win if they can knock them off. The problem is that they've only really got heavy weapons teams left, and all of those heavy weapons teams are gone apart from one. But Andy only has 2 Terminators left of his entire army holding that centre objective, and the game is about to end, right? So, in his final turn, Andy sees that a las cannon heavy weapons team is bearing down on his Terminators with a clear line of sight to them. Andy looks around the battlefield desperately trying to figure out what the hell to do, and in the end, he takes a near immobilised, crippled Rhino battle tank, and he chundles it in between his Terminators and the las cannon squad. completely cutting off their line of sight. Now, in modern 40k, you just say, well, what's the big deal? Move around it and shoot. You can't. Heavy weapons in the old school 3rd edition Warhammer 40,000 couldn't shoot if they moved. Unless they had a special rule saying they could do so, and the Imperial Guard players' last surviving heavy weapons did not have such rules. So in the end, the Imperial Guard player shook Andy's hand, blew up his Rhino battle tank, and the game ended. That was it. That was a skill move by Andy to win himself the game. And the guy shook his hand before starting his last turn, because he thought, yeah, that's an amazing move, my friend, well done. That's the kind of skill I'm looking for when I'm looking at what skill looks like in Warhammer 40,000. It's reacting to the unfolding battlefield with poise and finding creative ways to win games. To me, most tournaments have lost this magic. You may indeed get close or even exciting games, but 40k in itself has turned into an annoying card game of secondaries and all other sorts of bollocks as we go on through the game that just slows it down. But they will be played based on dice luck and list building for the most part. Hardly ever on the skills of the generals playing the game itself. This year I attended many events for the first time in my local area to dive into this side of the hobby. I've not been to a national tournament yet, I'm hoping to do that next year. And even hearing the testimony of the people at said local tournaments, this is the prevailing opinion that I'm finding. Most tournaments are based on list building and maybe 10% general skill. And that's okay. The tournament players like the game this way, and all power to them. I agree, you should play the game exactly how you want, but I don't think, for me, it's the best way to play the game and get the most out of it. So I've addressed tournaments. There we go. The elephant in the room has been addressed. So, what can narrative campaigns bring to the table? Well, they bring a few things to the table. Whilst tournaments and competitive play pushes quite naturally for a more homogenized rule set, single pose and standard models, and a one-size-fits-all set of codexes that is extremely balanced and fair, narrative campaigns are different, right? The more streamlined, the more normal, the more homogenized, the more everybody has the access to the same skill set game you have, the more tournament friendly it is. This is not to say that all things that aid tournaments are evil, or that people who do tournaments want monopose models. Most of them don't, as in most gamers don't, most hobbyists don't, right? I am just saying that wargaming, following the electronic competitive Twitch gaming trend, will lead to a more bland and less magical game. Just to wrap up what I was saying about tournaments. So, it's alright saying that, North, but what do your lovely, precious narrative campaigns bring to the table? Well, let's look at a list. We love those on this channel. Number 1, conversions. All narrative campaigns and events thrive on hobbyists making unique units and models that fit the ongoing campaign. Let me pull you back in to the rulebook here, right? And I'll tell you a little story about something that happened in my own Games Workshop store. So, back in the day, we did ourselves a lovely campaign. It was a... let me just check on my notes here. It was a mix between what we call a branched campaign. In fact, you know what? I'm going to show you in the actual rulebook here what we were doing. That's the best way to do it. Okay. So, it was actually a mix between a map campaign and a tree campaign. I call it a branch campaign, but yeah, we'll call it a tree campaign. We'll go with it. So, we would have certain parts of the map that had different trees attached to them. So we would have, like, a city has its own campaign tree, and a munitions factorum field of factories had its own campaign tree. And you would sign up for a campaign tree and get involved doing that kind of a thing. And it went really, really, really well. One of the main things that went really well is that, and if you're a veteran of the channel, you know what I mean when I say this, I allowed everybody in the campaign to build a single unique unit by converting their models. Not only could they do this in model form, but I allowed them to make their own rules. Now, all of those rules had to be run by me to make sure that they were balanced and fair-ish, right? But every single one of these units was incredibly powerful. It was like a final boss, you know? I think we've heard that in different Hobby Nightmares as well, where people have taken that idea and run with it, you know? So we had one guy who was an Imperial Guard player. No, not Imperial Guard. Imperial Fists player, sorry. And he had something that he called the Phalanx. No, not the Starship. This was 10 Breacher Marines from Horus Heresy, who, if they linked their shields together in a solid block, were incredibly hard to kill. I think they got a 2+ invulnerable save. It was ridiculously hard to kill. And he plonked them right in the middle of the field, right on an objective, and say, come at me. The only issue was that if it was attacked from the side in close combat, or from the back in close combat, they lost that cohesion, and they lost that 2+ invulnerable save, right? But they were incredibly hard to shift, and I loved that. That's such a really cool way of going about it. We had Tyranid players creating monsters of their own design that could rend and combine feats from different Tyranid bioforms into a single thing. So you had Morlocks that were actually, you know, had the strength of Hive Tyrants, just burrowing up, and they were called skyscraper killers, or whatever it's called. These huge towers that were on the campaign map. These massive Morlock creatures would come up and just snap in half. They were that big, you know. They would create these massive monsters to go onto the tabletop. And there were certain battles that we had where all the Imperial players and even all the Xenos players had to band together to shoot these things as they were coming up from the floor. It was amazing. Absolutely amazing and impossible in tournament play. Alright? And the thing is, the tournament players in my store actively complained that those kinds of games are going on in the store. And that's not something that every tournament player would do. A lot of you guys are live and let live, but a lot of really sweaty tournament players will have an issue with you playing any sort of game that's not officially down the line rules of Warhammer 40k. I had people look at me in disgust when I discussed with them the rules for the campaign, and they could make up their own army unit if they wanted to, and let their imagination run wild, and we would keep all of of those units the same power level, do you know what I mean, around about, but they would all be really powerful. Some people hated that. No, that's not tournament play, that's not official Games Workshop play, I'm not playing that. Okay, go elsewhere. Go elsewhere, but the games we're going to play in store will likely revolve around this kind of game, you know? Anyway, not possible in a tournament game, just saying. Number 2, epic moments. These do happen in tournament games, for sure, but in narrative games, they are almost engineered to happen in campaigns. I remember losing game 1 of a campaign really badly at university, on a hive world, as we all made our way to the biggest hive city for a final battle at Christmas. So we were all fighting battles, making our way to the hive world, you know, and getting stronger or weaker as the games went on. By the time we got to the end, the final battle in the center hive city, to decide the fate of the world, my army was down to Kaldor Drago and 20 paladins. Now, that may seem like a lot, but that was all of my army, and everybody else had 3,000 point lists. Why? Because they ganged up on me all the way through the campaign, because in the year before this, the uni year before this, my Grey Knight list was a feared thing, and had won many, many, many battles, and engendered a lot of hate. A lot of people at the University Gaming Group didn't like my army, and so they pissed all over it when they got their chance. They ganged up on me in that last campaign and really kicked me in the balls all the way through it, and I was really annoyed. But what I did in the final battle there, right, is I took Kaldor Drago, I took my 20 paladins, and when it was my turn, I didn't do anything. I said no. All the Imperials were like, please, come and deep strike. I said no. I'll deep strike as and when I bloody well want to, you know? We got to turn 4, right when things were getting desperate, and that's when I deep struck in. Bang. Drago, paladins, right, on top of the orbital bombardment array. The person who captured that could decide what to do with the orbital bombardment array. And so I said, I would like to sync up all Imperial battleships in orbit, and I want to perform exterminatus on this planet. Then, I want to teleport away just before it comes in. To do these certain things, we would roll on a d20. Because, you couldn't just call it in. You'd have to, chance decided whether you could do it or not. I was given a roll of 20 to do all that. Okay? I got 20, of course. Now, that's where the story's going, right? Roll the 20. And the referee went, well, I guess North's done that then, right? Yeah, the entire world's going to be annihilated. And I was like, yeah, all of you, suck my balls. Literally, suck my balls. I'm going, goodbye, and I removed my models from the table and destroyed the entire place. Now, what happened after that was epic. Because I'd done my thing. Now the battle degenerated into all of the armies and characters fighting towards their landing zones to get back to their teleport homers with their ill-gotten gains before the absolutely piss take of the Exterminatus came down on top of them. And all of them got out, and it was an epic, epic final battle as they were all running and gunning towards their landing zones. It was brilliant, and again, it couldn't happen in a competitive play setting. It could only happen in a narrative campaign setting. That's the only way it could have happened. They were pissed at the start when I did that, but eventually they reasoned with it. They were like, yeah, do you know what? I gave a reason too. There was demonic presence on the world. We'd seen that many times. In fact, there were demon armies even on the field at the time. And most of the Imperial players had been shooting at me the entire time. Even in previous games. So fuck them. And they all went, we're really annoyed at that. And then the referee jumped in and said, no. But you've all got your objectives sorted out. You now need to get out before that, orbital bombardment comes down. So I got to have my moment, they got to have their moments, and everybody left happy. And it's a really, really, really good game, and one that I still remember to this day. I played many games at events. I can very rarely remember anything that I've done in those events. But this one I remember. What does that say? And number 3, lore and stories. That's another thing that's come up quite a lot. Lore and stories. Probably the most obvious strength of the narrative campaign, I know. But the narrative of a narrative campaign is a surefire way to work on your own creativity. It's like being a dungeon master, but in a really relaxed and slow way. Like in slow motion. Imagine designing a setting, a conflict, and different battles that occur during the campaign on a growing ladder as you reach a summit with your players. There are escalation campaigns where your armies start in small games and small numbers, but grow larger as the campaign goes on, for instance. There are set-piece campaigns that have a guaranteed set of battles as you guys play out the stories of the campaign. For instance, and we can see it on the tree before, let me just put it up here for you. You see on the right hand side there on the tree campaign, for instance, there are 4 players, maybe. 2 players fight over a heavy weapons system and depot, and 2 fight over an ecclesiarchy outpost. 2 separate games, right? The winner of mission 1 gets an extra tank to add to their forces for the remaining games of the campaign. The winner of mission 2 gets buffs to their morale rolls for the rest of the campaign as priests start following them around and giving them all sorts of buffs, right? Then the 2 winners and the 2 losers play each other, and they go on in a spider diagram leading all the way to the final 4-way mega battle to decide the fate of the campaign. I'm sure you can see the narrative force behind this simple campaign structure idea, and you can take this and make it as complex or as simplistic as you like. But how cool does that sound? And it's even designed to give everybody a win eventually. So eventually the guys who lost the first game will win a second game or the third game down the line, right? If somebody wins 2 games in a row in that way, you can give them a big disadvantage for game number 3. Give them 1,000 points less than their opponent and have them hold a certain area, for instance. Right? Make them earn and keep their advantages. and they will lose a lot of battles like that to people who lost their first 2 battles. It keeps things going, and it makes sure that you're all telling a story together on the tabletop. That's what's most important for me in this hobby, in this setting that we're playing in. So, that is what campaigns bring to the table. It allows 40k to do what, in my opinion, 40k does best. Tell amazing stories in an amazingly grimdark and heroic way. If you feel the magic has been lost from your Warhammer 40,000 games, then maybe you should give this kind of thing a shot. You never know. It could save your hobby and open up a whole new branch of possibilities. Alright? What do you think? Let me know in the comment section down below. Am I mad? Have I gone crazy? Are you a big tournament player who's been really offended by all the things that I've just said? Let me know in the comment section down below. Again, I'm not saying you can't enjoy your hobby the way you want to enjoy it. Of course you can, lads. I'm not saying that whatsoever. What I am saying is that there are different ways to enjoy the hobby, and for me, I think this is the best way to do it. Let me know what you think in the comment section down below. I love you a long time. I'll be back tomorrow with some more hobby nightmares. Have a good one. Bye now.